Veganism has been around for centuries, but it's never been as prevalent as it has in 2018. The number of vegans has risen by 360% in the past 10 years in the UK alone. But it isn't just Britain that's going green.
We stand together in solidarity for animal liberation, and we'll march into the streets and make sure our voices are heard.
The whole world is facing a vegan revolution, but with any revolution, there's an opposition. So do you think there's a chance that society could ever go 100% vegan?
Absolutely not. Not in a million years.
During this episode, I'm finding out what it takes to be a British farmer in 2018, from the struggles they face,
if you just opened the farm gates and let them go, there would be absolute chaos,
to the ones leaving the livestock industry behind.
You sort of look after them, but you know that ultimately they're destined to go to the slaughterhouse.
And to the next generation of young farmers.
Just being surrounded by it, and just like the feeling after working or going to the farm afterwards just makes me want to do it even more.
Animal agriculture farming dates back to over 10,000 years ago. The growth of constant demand in animal food products has risen drastically since then, resulting in nearly every country in England having at least one monumental-sized livestock farm. This comes as a part of a 26% rise in concentrated factory farming in the past 6 years alone. But with this growth of farming comes an uprising. As the demand for vegan food has risen by 140% in the past year, the vegan community is providing that this lifestyle does not seem to be slowing down. One person that has been at the centre of the debate is a young farmer from Northumberland. I managed to speak to her about the agriculture industry that she's involved in and the challenges she's faced. She has asked to keep her name anonymous due to the stigma she faced after a recent interview where she spoke out and stood up for farmers. Do you feel like the animal agriculture industry is under threat?
I wouldn't say we're under threat so much. I think it's specific individuals are perhaps feeling threatened. You'll know about the February Dairy campaign that just finished there, at the end of February. What we found after that month of kind of celebrating dairy and dairy products was that sales of dairy produce went up by about 6%. We took that as, obviously a very good thing. Oh wow, we've really done something here. We've broadcast the good in consuming dairy. It seems to have, piqued a lot of interest.
February did pique a lot of interest indeed. The social media campaign, which many have claimed to be the dairy industry's response to January's Veganuary. Participants of February pledged to share a dairy positive post to show the alleged benefits of these products. The woman behind the campaign, ex-vegan, and the dairy industry's Woman of the Year, Dr. Jude Capper. She made quite the name for herself on social media, having numerous run-ins with vegans who tried to debunk the campaign. I'm just having a look through Dr. Capper's Twitter feed now. I find it quite shocking that she's responding to tweets that are referring to vegans in burning buildings and to them even being shot. I think it's absolutely appalling for someone who claims to have received death threats themselves from vegans to be supporting something like that. And for someone who is meant to be looked up to and respected by the people within the farming and dairy industry, I can't see how someone like that is a good role model. I also think it's interesting that on her website she says that it's okay for anyone to have any dietary wishes and requirements and what they believe in, but for her to be turning around and liking and supporting stuff like that, I think it's very hypocritical of her. I reached out to Jude Capper to speak to her about some of the issues I'm documenting, but she failed to respond to me. But I did manage to get in contact with a vegan YouTuber with over 28,000 followers who clashed with Jude Capper earlier this year. So basically we're just speaking about Jude Capper and I want to know what happened between you and her when you came into a run-in with her.
So she was sort of the crown jewel in launching the February campaign, which was of course, not widely successful at all. So I wanted to make a video on this, as many vegans sort of did. They were like sort of posting against Febby Dairy. I made a video basically sort of goofing on her. It was meant to be seen as comedy. I don't think she necessarily saw that. She sort of saw the video and she wanted to, she said about suing and all this sort of stuff, but inevitably went to the point where she just blocked me. Which, I mean, if you can't handle the truth, fair enough.
So why did she come to the conclusion that she was going to sue you? What was so bad about that video?
The video, it did insinuate that she might do drugs, but it was meant to be seen as comedy. At the end of the day, if you're going to support an industry that is so vindictive and cruel and hurts living beings, then I think you should be able to withstand a bit of comedic banter.
So overall, do you think that the Febby Dairy campaign was a success on her behalf?
No, the Febby Dairy campaign wasn't a success at all. You know, the vegans completely overtook it and showed it. And I think really what it did was show to more people what really is happening in the dairy industry. You know, the tweets that were the most popular were the people showing the reality of the situation. You know, I see in these Farmer Weekly pages and so forth that, you know, that sales are up and all this stuff. I don't think the dairy industry is really telling it as it is. I think maybe they're trying to put on a brave face. They're not like seeing the reality of the situation, and they're not showing that, you know, veganism and the vegan movement is having a true effect on their industry.
So it looks like the vegan movement are affecting the dairy industry more than they want to admit. But I want to be sure, so I'm going back to speak to my anonymous interviewee to find out more. What is the farming industry's response to veganism? Do you feel like it has massively affected your business?
No, I don't feel it has affected our business as such, because out of this situation where I think people are kind of butting heads, it is making people a lot more aware of buying local produce, British produce, you know, whether that is fruit, vegetables, meat, dairy products, eggs. Like, it has laid a lot of emphasis on reducing food miles, buying meat that's been raised ethically.
A lot of vegans come back and say that animals kept within farming industries is a form of exploitation and it holds them against their will. What is your response to that?
See, that's the funny thing, is if you just open the farm gates and let them go, there would be absolute chaos. The management system would completely break down. You would have inbreeding going on. You would have the disease epidemic potential is terrifying. If foot and mouth ever came around again, you know, that would just be absolutely devastating to these animals that had just been released into the wild. With regard to animal exploitation, farmers just we really do not see it like that. We see it as I suppose almost a kind of symbiotic relationship. We care for these animals and in the end they sustain us.
Do you think that the animal agriculture industry, from being on the farm through the whole journey to the slaughterhouse, is cruel in any way at all?
You do get bad management practices. There are bad farms out there. There are bad people out there who work with animals and who are not perhaps as scrupulous as they should be. But overall, the part of the industry that I work in, that I've experienced all my life, I am happy and actually quite proud to be part of that, because I know what has gone into these animals that are then ending up in the food chain. I know the hours of dedication and hard work and care that have gone into raising them. So I just do not see it as cruel, and a lot of people like me don't see it as cruel, because, you know, we are there to protect these animals and look after them up until that point that they enter into the food chain.
After my conversation with this farmer, I felt like the community may be turning a blind eye as to what is happening in the industry. In regards to animal exploitation, I do believe that most farmers look after their animals and treat them well, but at the end of the day it's still a life that is going to slaughter. I think there's a chance that society could possibly go completely vegan. Maybe not in my lifetime, but there is facts to prove this lifestyle is ever growing. But at the same time, events held by the farming community like Febby Dairy shows their industry is trying to fight back. It seems like a constant debate and battle for the top and who can do it better. But this isn't the only farmer that admits to the big vegan debate. I did some research and found a vegetarian farmer from Derbyshire, Jay Wild. Recently, he donated his herd of cows worth £40,000 to an animal sanctuary, as he couldn't bear the thought of sending them to slaughter anymore. His new plans are to create an organic vegan farm. I'm intrigued to find out how a farmer similar to the one I just spoke to came to make this life-changing decision. So I understand you used to farm cows for beef. What are your plans for your farm now you've stopped doing this?
The plan is that we'll grow vegan organic vegetables. The vegan organic bit means that we have no animal inputs.
How did your morals stand between being a vegetarian and farming cows for beef? How did you feel every time that you sent your cows to the slaughterhouses?
I think the main feeling was a feeling of betrayal, because you sort of look after them as well as you can, but you know that ultimately they're destined to go to the slaughterhouse. You have a strange relationship with the animals when you know you're sort of trying to be kind to them and keep them as happy as possible, and then in the back of your mind you know the basic reason for all that effort is to send them to slaughter. And obviously I've been aware of that for a long time, which is why I was already a vegetarian.
On saying that, what was sort of the last thing that made you decide, I'm going to give up farming cows?
I think the last thing that made me decide was the opportunity to do something different. That came about through talking to a member of Veggie's catering campaign from Nottingham. We'd got a summer camp on the farm. Well, most of the people were vegetarians or vegans, and they were quite upset to find they'd arrived on a beef farm. Veggie's catering campaign suggested we got in touch with the Vegan Society to explore possible alternative things to do on the farm.
So what do you think the benefits would be if everyone stopped farming livestock?
Well, I think the main benefit would be a huge reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, CO2, from all the effort and fuel and fertiliser and transport that goes into feeding and looking after livestock. I think people's health would probably be better if they ate less meat, and it would conceivably free up some land to be turned over to growing trees or even rewilded to some extent, so it would have many benefits.
So how do you think your new business will stand? Do you think it'll work out better financially for you?
I don't know, I'm hoping so. Keeping the livestock at the very low intensity that we did wasn't really a viable business, and it's the grants for environmental maintenance that have kept the farm going to a large extent. It should be profitable, I hope so, yes.
My interview with Jay left me feeling as though I had a lot of respect for him and what he'd done. I can only imagine how terrifying it was giving up his whole livelihood worth £40,000 for something that might not potentially even work. And that is a lot of money to just lose. But his morals said it was the right thing to do, and now those cows will live out their lives happily in a sanctuary. I feel like this story just proves that times are changing and people are starting to think more about the future of production methods. And with Jay being a farmer for the majority of his life, he's clearly aware of the reality of what is going on. I was just having a look at the Facebook farming page. I wanted to get an insight from someone who hasn't received the same media attention or been on the news to get a general overview of the farming industry. After posting on the page inquiring if anyone would be willing to speak on behalf of their community, I received a few negative comments for being vegan. I found one girl who was willing to speak to me. Her name is Yanni Kitson, a young farmer hoping to study animal agriculture next year at college. I was interested to find out where she thinks the industry is heading. What are your reasons for wanting to take a career path in the animal agriculture industry?
Well, I moved up here about 5 years ago, and just being surrounded by it, and just like the feeling after working or going to the farm afterwards just makes me want to do it even more. Just being like in the community, it's just like a great atmosphere.
Do you feel the vegan community has or ever will affect the animal agriculture businesses in any way?
Well, they have some of the activists. Like, there's nothing wrong with being vegan. It's just sometimes the way some of their actions maybe could calm down a bit. It just doesn't seem right what they do, but it's their opinion and we have ours. But if they just left us alone a bit more, Labour's getting on with what we do, then that would be good.
Have you faced issues from vegans for being a farmer yourself?
I have, yes. I ran the Young Farmers of the Twitter account for a week. Young people between the age of 13 and 25 can run. And you can post whatever you want, and it's an open account. I posted videos of cows and just got rude comments saying, "Oh, how can you do that to them? It's so cruel. Look at what you do," and stuff. But nothing that bad.
So, how do you, as a young farmer, plan to respond to the backlash that the farming community are facing?
Do it in a positive way, and just try and not to give a negative impact. Just promote what we're doing.
So overall, where do you think that the farming industry is heading?
It's developing with new technology, and in the dairy sector, especially with robotic milking and new ways to calf and stuff like that. But it's just the milk prices. It's very hard with Brexit that's coming up, and there's a lot to learn. As I'm only a young farmer, it could change. I'm not really sure, but I think it's going stronger. But it's quite hard to tell at the moment.
What's your opinion on vegan alternatives to food? Have you ever tried any?
I have tried any. I've tried the Lisa McCartney's food. It just doesn't have the same taste. I'd never choose it. I love my food and the meat and the products. Meat's just better for you, in my opinion.
I think my major takeaway from Yanni is that the generation now is just as passionate, if not more passionate, than the generation prior. She talks about technology advancing within the dairy industry, but it's hard to ignore how far technology has progressed in rival industries. You only have to look at the development of lab-grown meat, and I think it's undeniable that this will have a damaging effect on the farming industry in years to come. As I ventured through the British farming industry, it became increasingly clear to me that this was a community that are under pressure. If you believe veganism to be the future, then there are two sides to this story. On one hand, you have farmers that are passionate about their work, and on the other hand, you have the likes of Jay Wilde, who gave up his whole livelihood, a choice that shows passion, not just for his work, but also for the earthlings that once called his farm home. The question is, if you are vegan and you reject animal exploitation, then how do you change the mind of those at the other end of the spectrum? Although I have a certain perception on farmers, when I spoke to my anonymous interviewee, I felt as though we could converse without the aggression, which I think is the only approach to take if a change is to be made. I don't condone vegans sending death threats. If you want to spread the message of veganism, then that isn't the way to go around it. In order to have leverage against Dr. Jew Kappa and campaigns such as Febudairy, vegans must use education, information and facts. As we move forward, it will be the next generation of farmers who will have to make a choice as to where the industry is headed. In my opinion, people like Yanni will have to decide whether they want to be on the right side of history, and that choice will mean they can continue with antiquated practices or move forward with a green footprint.